Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Fairweather Report. I am Daryl Fairweather. I'm Redfin's chief economist. I'm also the author of Hate the Game, Economic Cheat Codes for Life, Love, and Work. And in these live streams, I go through the latest housing market data from Redfin. We release housing market data every Thursday. So every Thursday, I'm here to talk about it. And I'm also talking about current events in the economy because I'm an economist and that's what I like to talk about. So let me share my screen, do it the way I like, the layout that I like, and let's just get right into it. Feel free to drop your comments or questions as they occur to you in your mind. I will do my best to read them, and I always appreciate all of the feedback I get from you lovely people. Okay, first things first. What is going on in the housing market this week? The news this week is that pending home sales are slipping. They're slipping, they're sliding, slip and slide, summer, do the summer metaphor here. And the reason is the reason why the housing market's been kind of crappy for a while now. I don't know if I can say that on TikTok. They don't like it when I curse. Is that a curse word? I don't know. I'll say so. It's been poopy. Same word. The housing market has been so poopy lately, and it's not because it's been eating all of the bad lettuce. It's been because of high mortgage costs, and the most immediate reason that mortgage rates are high right now is because of the conflict in Iran. When there is conflict in the Middle East, that restricts the supply of oil. Oil is an input into just about everything that gets produced around the world, and that sends prices and inflation higher. And that higher inflation pushes up mortgage rates. And although a couple of weeks ago we seemed to have a deal, a deal for a deal, a deal for a deal for a deal, very, not exactly the most binding deal, but we had a deal and mortgage rates came down and demand came back. More people were buying homes because mortgage rates slid and it became temporarily more affordable to borrow to buy a home. But more recently, that deal has fallen apart. There's been more conflict in the Middle East and mortgage rates have come back up. And just as mortgage rates have come back up, demand has slipped. Pending sales have slipped. And I feel like this is where we're going to be for a while. I don't know how much longer Wall Street, the markets are going to care about announcements for deals when we know from experience that it's not real until it's actually real. So I think this is going to persist. I think we're going to have these stubbornly high mortgage rates for longer than what was originally seemed to be. And we're just kind of stuck up here with 6.5% mortgage rates. And that is pulling both buyers and sellers out of the housing market. So if I scroll down here, you'll be able to see that. So this is week over week changes, and these are seasonally adjusted. Pending home sales are down 2.2% week over week, and new listings are down 1.2% week over week. So both sellers and buyers backing off because of high mortgage rates. Now it's obvious why buyers would back off because of high mortgage rates. It directly makes it less affordable for them to borrow to buy a home. But sellers are also sensitive. They're sensitive because many sellers want to buy again and are facing the same mortgage rates. And sellers also don't want to sell into a market where buyers are backing off of. So when they see that buyers are backing off, they too back off. And the housing market remains stuck as it has been since 2022. So I've been talking about this for many weeks now, and it's really just the same version of the same story. I think the only thing new is that it just keeps dragging on. And the longer it drags on, the longer it seems like it's going to drag on. And it just feels like we're stuck here with these higher mortgage rates. And the luxury side of the market is doing pretty well because wealthy people can navigate around high mortgage rates. But for people who are borrowing, this is a very real constraint for them. All right, let me just pop on over, see if we got any questions. Yeah, Chilo over on TikTok says that high interest rates are not helping. People are struggling with debt, savings, and planning. And that is true. There is the direct effect of high interest rates on the housing market, but there are also indirect effects. when people's credit card debt becomes more expensive because they are charged higher interest rates, they have less money left over to spend on something like housing, whether that be rent, or they have less savings to accumulate for a down payment for a home. And inflation works the same way. When gas costs more, people have less money left over for savings. And that also inhibits their ability to buy a home. So the economy, it's relatively strong. I made a video, if you want to go check it out on my YouTube page, about where the economy is headed next, where I explain using this chart where we are and where I think we're going. And right now, the economy is, more in this orange quadrant where we have high growth in the economy. We have data centers being built that are fueling GDP growth, and healthcare is still a growing sector that is contributing to GDP growth. But we also have high inflation because of the conflict in Iran, but also because the AI boom is inflationary. We're using a lot of resources to build all of these data centers. We're spending our money solving problems right now, like failing infrastructure or fighting wildfires, et cetera, et cetera. And the windmill here is supposed to represent us trying to get to cleaner energy sources that aren't as efficient as nuclear, but that's kind of off topic. Anyway, the point is that when you have both high growth and high inflation, you get high interest rates because, broadly speaking, when you take out all of the noise, interest rates are equal to growth in the economy plus inflation. And I go through this in the video if you would like a more in-depth analysis of it. But we have high inflation right now. We also have high growth, and that means high interest rates, which means it's more expensive to borrow to buy a home. All right, so what's happening more locally in the housing market? Nationally, home sellers outnumber buyers 2-1, making it a very strong buyer's market. You have more negotiating power as a buyer when there are many more sellers than there are you. When you are the rare entity in the market as a buyer, that gives you negotiating power. The same way where if there were more job openings than people looking for jobs, the job seekers would have the negotiating power. When there are more home buyers than home sellers, the home buyer has the negotiating power. And Miami, Nashville, and much of Texas are the strongest buyers markets in the country. You can see what it looks like nationally. How, even pre-pandemic, we really didn't have much of a buyer's market. Since the Great Financial Crash and the Great Recession, it's been pretty consistently either a balanced market with the same number of sellers or buyers. There was a brief moment right before the pandemic where interest rates were going up and there was more sellers than buyers. And then during the pandemic, it was a very, very strong sellers market. That's when we saw the bidding wars. But what we're experiencing now, it's even more severe or less normal in a way than what we had during the pandemic. In the pandemic, it was a very strong seller's market, and now is even stronger of a buyer's market. Now, the caveat I will put here is that a lot of these sellers are not serious sellers. They're skittish. They're quick to delist their homes. They will let deals fall apart if the buyer, wants more money in the deal. Like maybe they notice that the roof is old during the inspection. They want a credit. The sellers are not really budging even though the buyers should have more negotiating power. Sometimes the sellers are just like, F it, I'm gonna leave this market altogether. I tried selling, I didn't get the offer I wanted, and I'd rather back out than sell. And the reason why is because they have really cheap mortgage rates, so they would rather just stay put and keep their mortgage because their mortgage is so great. But when you look a bit more locally, things are a bit different. So in Nassau County and in Milwaukee, Montgomery County, Pennsylvania, Newark, New Brunswick, Providence, San Francisco, these are all still strong sellers markets where the number of buyers outnumber the number of sellers, giving sellers better negotiating power. So we always say in real estate that everything is local, and there's different trends. But the real fundamental trend here is that there's just more demand than supply. And the reason why there's not much supply here is that these are places that are very bad at building homes. Nassau County is a very NIMBY place. Long Island. San Francisco is a very notoriously NIMBY place. NIMBY stands for not in my backyard, meaning that there's like a lot of homeowners who block housing development, which limits the supply, which creates these scenarios where there are more buyers than there are sellers, even when mortgage rates are high, which keeps home values high, which is kind of the point of being a NIMBY, is to limit the housing supply, because as a homeowner, you benefit when your home value goes up, even though all the first-time home buyers and renters suffer. So that's why these markets are still strong sellers markets. It's because of the local politics going on there. But the strongest buyers markets are, did I already go through that? Are in Miami, Nashville, and Houston, San Antonio, and Austin, which are all places that are very GIMBY, where it is very easy to build, where the state government overrides the NIMBYs. These places have NIMBYs, like NIMBYs are everywhere, but the state governments here, they are the ones who hold most of the power when determining the housing supply, and they see things at a higher level than the local governments, which tend to focus just on what their local homeowners want. The state tends to think more about, like, okay, what's best for the economy overall? And these places tend to allow for more housing, which is why there is a lot of homes for sale in these places relative to the number of buyers, giving buyers more negotiating power. There's some other things going on in these markets. Miami and Texas are places where home insurance is going up, which I will talk about later, which is also making it harder to be a home buyer. So they're up against not just higher mortgage payments, but also higher insurance costs. And also Texas is a place that has high property taxes. So they're up against high property taxes as well. So, good in some ways, but still challenging in other ways. All right. Tom Dick says, can you help me buy another house? I can't help you personally, but I can refer you over to the good people at Redfin who can help you. They have great agents, so go check them out. All right, what else is going on in the world? So we released a report this week about where we surveyed homeowners, or not homeowners, we surveyed movers to ask them the reasons why they were moving. This was a representative survey of the US, and we found that the number one reason that people said they were moving was for better weather. Not far off at number 2 was concern for natural disasters or climate risks. We wanted to distinguish between the two because there's like a difference between between caring about weather and caring about climate change risks. So we teased that out a bit, but there was number 1 and number 2 spot, which is really surprising because we've done this survey in the past with a different survey company. So unfortunately, it's not directly comparable. But in the past, moving for a new job ranked higher, moving to be near family ranked higher, crime and safety have always kind of have been a major reason. But it is very striking that moving for better weather and better climate are the top 2 reasons for moving now. Now, I think part of the reason why is that a lot of the people who are responding that they are moving for better weather are retirees. And once you retire, you're not moving to be near a job. Maybe you're moving to be close to family if you want to go help out with the grandkids. But a lot of times retirees, they leave the Northeast, they leave the Midwest, these cold winter places, and they move to the Sun Belt with warm winters because there's something about getting old where you just want to be where it's hot. So that's probably driving this trend. But the retirees are also the people who have a very strong reason to move right now because the job market's pretty stuck. So maybe the reason why people aren't moving for a new job is because not many people are getting a new job right now. Jonathan Duran says rates aren't as bad as the prices. That is a valid point because when you look at home prices, let me scroll down to home prices. Oh, do we have this here? I can go over to the data center. Oh. When you look at home prices, when mortgage rates went up back in 2022, home prices fell for a while, but then they went back up. And they kept going up and kept going up and kept going up. Normally when mortgage rates go up, home prices fall, or at least home price growth falls. What's different this time is the mortgage rate lock-in effect, that many home sellers have low mortgage rates they got during the pandemic that they still don't want to give up. So when mortgage rates went up, it pulled both buyers out of the market and sellers. And because we don't have as many homes for sale and as many buyers, prices stayed elevated. Now, I will say that in real inflation adjusted terms, prices have come down. They just haven't come down enough to compensate for the higher mortgage rates. So all in, it is still way more expensive to buy a home because of the high prices and high mortgage rates of today. Prices have remained stickily high, which has kept things unaffordable. And that's a real barrier to entry for people trying to get into the housing market right now, or even people trying to sell their homes. They don't want to give up those low mortgage payments. All right, what else am I talking about? Okay. Oh wait, so I was talking about the war earlier. We got some new inflation data this week that tells us a bit about, you know, how bad has it really been in terms of the effect of the Iran war. We know that gas prices went up and then they cooled, and that's showing up in the inflation data because it's a bit, delayed. This data reflects the period when it seemed like we had a deal and it seemed like gas prices were coming down. But there are other sources of inflation here besides just the war. We have AI-driven demand for materials, energy from these data centers that is driving up inflation. But another thing that dropped inflation is that a lot of the tariffs were rolled back. So that also allowed inflation to come down a bit. But see, it spiked here. It's still elevated. It's still above the Fed's 2% target by a wide margin. 3.5% is very far off from 2%. Core inflation, which takes out volatile things like food and energy, is a bit lower. I think it's like 2.6%, probably says somewhere in this report, which is good, but still not done yet. And earlier this week, Fed Governor Waller, he is a Fed governor, yeah, Federal Reserve Governor Christopher Waller, he came out and he said, like, if we get bad inflation data, we need to hike rates. Now, we did not get bad inflation data, but that doesn't mean that rates are coming down. It just means that, we get a bit of a stay of execution in terms of a rate hike because we got some good inflation data last month. But, it seems like the conflict in Iran is back on and gas prices are back up. So we may get a worse report next month. AI is still a dominant force, keeping inflation high. I'll go back to my little visual. These data centers are still growing, contributing to growth and inflation, which pushes up interest rates. The breakdown in global trade and war, I have that down here. That contributes to higher inflation, but also limits economic growth, which is kind of like a muddled thing for interest rates. But yeah, there's still a lot of inflationary pressures in the economy right now that we still need to worry about, which means that the Fed can't cut and mortgage rates are probably going to remain sticky in the high end. All right, cool. Dat Panda over on Instagram says, I bought my house in 2019. I'm glad I did. Yeah, anybody who bought a house before 2021 or earlier, I would say, you got a huge windfall. Home equity has gone way up. Home prices have gone up and have not come down. It's hard to tap that equity because if you sold your house, then you wouldn't have that mortgage rate anymore. If you refinance your mortgage, you're going to have to refinance at existing rates. So you can get the cash out, but it's going to cost you a lot in terms of debt. But still, you get to live in a house that is now much more expensive to buy, and you got to buy it back when it was less expensive. So that in and of itself is a win for anybody who bought a home 2021 or earlier. And that, I think, is causing inequality in the economy, just because, there's inequality between homeowners and renters. Homeowners have the wealth and the renters don't. But it also causes a difference in perception about how bad housing affordability really is. Like, if you own your home and your mortgage rate is fixed, you may not be aware of how hard it is out there for first-time buyers and renters. And maybe you think the biggest issue in housing affordability is that property taxes are too high. And that's not true. A lot of the times property taxes are not high enough because the people who own the homes are the wealthy people, right? So maybe they should be paying more taxes because they own the property. That's like the philosophy of the property tax. But yeah, homeowners have a very different perception of what's going on in the housing market than first-time buyers and renters. Okay, another thing that could be contributing to inflation is climate change. So this story has kind of gone under the radar. It's been happening for a very long time. I mean, droughts are things, they're like hard to perceive because they happen so slowly. But Lake Powell, which is a vital reservoir for the American West, it's what the Colorado River feeds into, has plunged to unprecedentedly low levels as there's a water crisis and drought in the United States. And I saw another headline about how like the federal government is going to start contributing water to the reservoirs so it doesn't turn into a crisis. But that seems like, putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound, because this is just going to keep getting worse. And the reason that this relates to housing is that you cannot get a mortgage if you do not have water access, if you do not have water rights. This was an issue in Arizona a couple of years ago where Phoenix started having to say no to developers. Like, no, you cannot develop more homes in these suburbs of Phoenix because these places are running out of water, and it's just gotten so bad that we just have to say no more development. And yeah, so if the West runs out of water, it's definitely going to impact the housing market, because if homes lose water, then you can't. Who's going to buy a home that doesn't have any water? Who wants to buy a home that you have to have water trucked into? So climate change is definitely it's like one of the, it's, we might not be paying attention to what's happening right now with these water levels. When people's home values drop, then they're going to be paying attention. I mean, obviously, if they can't get water, they'll be paying attention, but people care about money too, and this world, so they're going to care when their home values drop. And this is, if you're ever buying a home, and you're considering buying a home that's on well water as opposed to municipal water, this is something to be aware of. Like, is that well going to run dry? It sounds so like Old West, the well running dry, but it's a real issue because of these droughts. I Really Want to Know podcast says, "What's good, Daryl? I hope all is well on your end." Hi, you were here last time. I'm glad you came back. I very much appreciate that. All right. Dot Panda says over on Instagram that they rented for 8 years and hated it. I wonder what you hated about it. I feel like renting, it's a very, some people like renting because it offers them flexibility. They don't want to have to deal with, a pipe breaking themselves. They'd rather just have their property manager or landlord deal with it. Some people don't like it because they don't like being told what to do. They don't like being told that they can't, paint the walls, or they can't play their music past a certain time, or they have to move when their lease is up. So it's really a trade-off between renting and buying. I mean, people always talk about the investment value of renting versus buying, running the numbers on, is it a better use of your money to rent versus buy? But there's also the lived experience of renting versus buying, and how much you value your autonomy and customizing your home, and also how much do you want to be told what to do by a landlord, and how much do you like your landlord, because that will probably impact whether you want to be told what to do. All of that feed into the rent versus buy equation. I Really Want to Know podcast says, "Do I really believe the headline numbers?" I guess I'll go back to the inflation numbers. I believe them. I have no reason to doubt them. I know a lot of economists that work in DC, work in the government, who assure me that the data coming out of the Bureau of Labor Statistics is still legitimate and we should still believe it. There's always going to be noise in the data. There's always going to be changes in the way that this data is reported, measurement error, as we call it in economics, that could make the numbers, need to be adjusted. There's also just differences in methodology. I know that there are other economists out there who try to come up with their own inflation figures that they think better reflect what's going on in the economy. There's always going to be, subjective calls to make about how to measure something like inflation. But I still believe that the people at the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the economists, the statisticians, they just want to do a good job. They care about this stuff. I think they care. I think that they do this work every day, not for the paycheck, but because they understand that having accurate statistics about where the economy is extremely important in terms of understanding how to guide the economy to a better place. And that might sound very abstract, but what that really means is that if we want to pull people out of poverty, we need to know, how much are people paying for things? How much are people earning? Because if we don't understand that, then how could we possibly solve these economic problems unless we have good economic statistics? So, yeah, I don't want to malign those people. I think that, they have a tough job, and I think that they are still trying to do it as best as they can. All right. What else? Okay, so I talked about this. Talked about that. Oh yeah. So another um climate story. I'm sure if anybody is living in the Midwest and the Northeast, they're already aware of this, but there's wildfire smoke coming in from Canada, worsening the air quality. And, as going back to this Redfin report, we know that 22% of people who are moving for better weather or because of natural disasters, including smoke or poor air quality. 21% reported that being a reason for moving. As I talk about in my book, plug my book real quick, I left Seattle because I was sick of dealing with wildfire smoke in Seattle. Moved to Wisconsin, it looks like the wildfire smoke followed me, but in actuality, Wisconsin doesn't really have that high of smoke risk. We're probably going to have smoke for like a day or two. When I was in Seattle, these smoke events would last 2 weeks. So, day or two versus 2 weeks, still less smoke. Harm reduction there. But this is a map of where air quality is predicted to be the worst because of climate change. And as you can see, it's like the entire West Coast is really the most vulnerable parts. So it's interesting because like right now, did I go too far? Oh, went too far. The smoke event is impacting the Midwest and Northeast, but really it's the West Coast where the smoke is predicted to get the worst. But maybe, you never really know with these climate predictions. The climate is very hard to predict. So maybe the wind will change and this is what's going to be the new normal. But no, I think, summer's not over. There'll probably be smoke events on the West Coast that validate that it really is the West that has the most risk for wildfires and poor air quality. Also, northern Florida. I guess there's a lot of woods and wildfires in northern Florida too. All right, where was I? Oh, I really want to know. Podcast says that he bought Hate the Game. Again, plugging my book. And he's reading it this weekend. All right, well, I will wait to hear what you think. I'm probably not going to do a live stream next week because next week I will be doing a live stream with Planet Money. So if you are an NPR Plus subscriber, or if you subscribe to NPR Plus, by next Thursday, you'll get to hear me do a live show with Planet Money where I answer questions from our audience. I did a live money. I did a Planet Money live show in Seattle earlier this year that was in person at a theater. It was a lot of fun. And I guess they liked me because they asked me to come and do it again, but this time for their NPR Plus subscribers in a virtual event. So this is scheduled for the exact same time that I do my live stream. So instead of you tuning into my live stream on YouTube or whatever you're getting your live streaming app, whatever, right now, you can go tune into NPR Plus and hear me there. And then I'm going to be on vacation the week after that. So I will be back. I'll be off for 2 weeks and I'll be back. But right now I'm here, I'm with you, and we're talking about the housing market and the economy. Where was I? Okay, so I thought this was pretty funny. Can I zoom out? All right, here we go. This was posted by my mutual Sam over on Blue Sky about Mamdani's policies. He is going to take 10% of street parking away in Manhattan in order to make room for covered trash cans. Now, in New York City, for some reason, they put all their garbage in bags and just leave it on the streets. It stinks. It attracts vermin like rats. They have a huge rat problem. And they do this because they don't have enough space for garbage bins, but they have space for cars somehow, for parking spots. Now, what does this have to do with housing? It doesn't have anything to do with housing. It has to do with land use. Land use is very important. When you have a limited supply of land, like you do in Manhattan, you have to start making these tough trade-offs. Do I want street space for cars, for parking, or for covered trash? Do I want to protect or benefit automobiles and drivers? Or do I want to deal with our rat infestation and the terrible smells emitting from this garbage. Seems like a pretty good trade, as this meme is illustrating. I would take that trade. Anytime. I've never parked in Manhattan. That's never. I mean, I lived in Manhattan for like 6 months of my life between internships when I was in college. So it's not like I'm a New Yorker or anything, but a very small percent of people who live in New York, who travel to New York, end up parking a car in Manhattan. So you're maybe hurting a very small tiny portion of people, but everybody gets to benefit from trash in cans. So seems like a policy win. Okay. And speaking of New York, I'm just going to go on a little New York tangent. Big news today was that Governor Hochul announced a moratorium on data centers. And Donald Trump blasted it. President Donald Trump said that it was, they should get rid of the moratorium immediately. Now, how does this relate to housing? All right. So these data centers take up a lot of energy. Even the US power companies have admitted that they are scrambling to secure equipment as surging data center demand strains their supplies. So there is just not enough electrical infrastructure to really accommodate all the data centers that are being planned. So, sometimes it can be a bad policy to do a moratorium and say, like, we're not going to do this now. We're going to do it later once we figure it out. We're going to pause this and figure it all out. Sometimes that's just like delay tactics. Oh, we're going to delay, and then we'll delay again, then we'll delay again, and then we'll delay again, and we'll never actually do it. I don't think this is about that. I think this really is about making sure that we have the capacity, the energy capacity, because Hochul has also come out and gone like full on pro nuclear, which I think is great. As we go back to my little chart here, the thing that gets us to a world where we have high growth and low inflation, which is really like the place where people have high incomes and things are affordable and everybody's happier, is a world where we have abundant clean energy. And we have AI that's not, just creating slop, that's actually making the economy more productive. And we have urbanism there too. So New York all around, I feel like I used to not like Hochul because she was blocking the congestion pricing from going through in New York. But lately, she's like really been on top of it, and I think making smart economic choices. Because even the economists are saying we got to slow our roll on this whole AI thing and make sure that we have the right regulations in place. And I really want to know, podcast says I'm right about the smell in New York City. It's bad. Shaking my head. Yeah, it's in like the hot in the summer. The garbage smell. It's terrible. It's gross. Too much sensory overload there. Okay. Yeah. So the top economists, including Daryl Acemoglu, shout out to him. I went to MIT for undergrad, and he was one of my professors. He's a big AI regulation economist, and if you don't know him, he's also just a very famous economist. He and some other economists like Eric, I'm not gonna try to say, I'll say Eric B. Eric, yeah, he was also at MIT. They have come out and said that we really need to slow this whole AI thing down until we can construct some policies that make sure that people don't get left behind. So their main gripe about AI is not so much about the energy issues. I think most economists will tell you that increasing demand for energy is probably going to just accelerate our clean energy transition, like what we're seeing in New York, where Governor Hochul wants to build a bunch of nuclear power to fuel the AI data centers, but building nuclear power will also make energy cheaper in general, and it's a clean source of energy. I know it sounds scary, nuclear, because there's like nuclear waste, but it doesn't emit carbon, zero carbon, nuclear. So I think a lot of economists feel like the energy thing, it's going to sort itself out because we'll just have a lot more investment in cheap sources of energy to weigh that out. But what these economists are really worried about with AI, it comes down to the general intelligence aspect of it. Okay, so this is a quote from Daron Acemoglu over at MIT, who said, "Good AI needs to complement humans, and this requires a redirection because the current focus on artificial general intelligence is an agenda for displacing humans from meaningful work." So, what these economists are saying is that we need to put regulations in place that encourage the development of AI that augments labor, that makes labor more productive, because making labor more productive results in higher wages, higher incomes, everybody being happy because they make more money. But artificial general intelligence, which is what Google is talking about, Meta is talking about, all these big AI people are talking about. The intention there is to build something that can do everything humans do, which is like not a good pitch, because it would be like coming into my house and telling me like, "Oh, your vacuum cleaner, I'm going to make an AI that vacuums your house." I mean, I have a robot vacuum cleaner, so it's kind of like that. A robot vacuum cleaner is nice, I guess, because it takes away my labor, but I already had a vacuum. Like, why would I need a robot vacuum if I already had a vacuum? It's not that big of a efficiency boost to replace something that we already have. And replacing human labor is kind of the same thing. Like, why are we trying to replace human labor with AI when we already have humans that do it well? The AI, like, we should be focusing on things that humans do not do well. And part of that is already happening. Like, I think the AI models we already have are in some ways very good at doing things that humans do not like. Like, nobody likes when I was first starting off my career, a lot of the work I did as an entry level economist was taking PDFs with a bunch of data in them and typing that data into a spreadsheet, data entry. I would physically have to read them. It wasn't like in a format that I could easily copy paste. I would have to manually look at the data and then enter the data. And I'm, like, as a human, very bad at that task because it's very boring. I'm going to space out and make mistakes. I'm just going to forget things. Turns out AI is really good at this. And this has made my life so much better as an economist doing research, because now I can spend less time doing the parts of my job that I hate the most, that used to be given to entry level research assistant economists. Now it's harder to get an entry level job because that work has now been replaced by AI, but the humans were never really good at it to begin with. And hopefully those entry level workers will be given tasks that they are good at, or maybe they'll spend more time in, I don't know, developing skills that can't be replaced by AI. But the point is that, like, we don't need an AI to do what I'm doing right now. We don't need an AI live streamer. It would be bad at it. And if it was good at it, like, what are we really doing here? We're just taking away a job that somebody enjoys, that somebody is uniquely good at. And we're spending a whole bunch of money to get there just for us to end up in the same place. Like, we should really be focusing AI on doing things that complement humanity. Now, this has been critiqued quite a lot by other economists and policymakers for saying, like, you want us to regulate for something that we don't even understand yet. Like, how do we don't know for a fact that AI is going to be replacing human workers. So why would we have policies now? We should just let things play out. I see where the frictions are, see where the bad outcomes are, and then kind of whack-a-mole them as we see them. But I disagree with this. And I think that Hollywood has a good example of this. So a couple of years ago, there was the writer's strike and the actor's strike. And this was like when ChatGPT was released. It was around 2023, 2024, I want to say. Before the AI models got as good as they are now, SAG-AFTRA and the other unions, they put rules in place to say, like, you got to have at least some humans in the writer's room. A show can't be entirely AI written, or you can't produce a replica of an actor without their consent. Even before this technology could actually replace a human actor, they were already, trying to see into the future. How can we protect our union members against AI while also recognizing that AI is a technology that could result in more acting jobs or better conditions for actors? Like, I think one of the things they talked about was, it's really annoying for actors to do reshoots. That's like when you film a movie, it's done, but then they realize that, like, something there was an inconsistency in one of the scenes. They have to call all the actors back, all the crew back, try to get all the cameras in the exact same position. God forbid the actor like got a scar on their face or something, and it ruins the continuity. They have to shoot it after the fact. But with AI, like maybe you don't have to do that. Maybe you don't have to have everybody come back, and it makes everybody's life better and everybody's happier. Sure. So they saw around these corners and tried to figure out what elements of AI are going to be good for workers and which elements do we need to protect workers against. And maybe this is like a good argument for unions, because recently Meta rolled out a feature that was going to allow anybody to take your Instagram content or your Facebook content and AI remix it, is what they called it. And there was all this post about, oh, you got to go disable this, you got to go disable this because it's opt-in. And it was SAG-AFTRA that got Meta to turn it off and make it opt-in instead of opt-out. So before you'd have to like, sorry, I think I said it wrong. You have to opt out, like it's turned on automatically and you have to go and opt out. But it was SAG-AFTRA that got them to switch it so it was opt-in, because they had many actors who have Instagram accounts who didn't want their content being remixed with AI, and their push for better policy from Meta benefited all of Meta users, all of Instagram users, whether or not you're in SAG-AFTRA. So I'm more on the side that like, yeah, I think that we should be giving workers more say over how to regulate AI. I think that we should, as Hochul has pointed out, invest way more in energy. And we should be kind of approaching it like SAG-AFTRA, where it's like we know that this has the potential to help people. We just want to make sure that we limit the ways that it hurts people. Yeah, I really want to know. Podcast says AI will replace us live streamers at some point. So let's enjoy it while we can. LOL. Yeah, I don't think so. I think that like the same way that there's still a market for hand knitted sweaters and artisan goods, I think that people will still want, their organically made, human made content. And that's why I think where live streaming might be taking off right now compared to other forms of content. Because like I've noticed, I'm sure other people have noticed on TikTok, like you can kind of tell when a creator is just reading off of some ChatGPT written script. Even in my own work, I've like really had to be conscious about when to go to one of these LLMs and ask it questions, because I don't want it infecting the way I speak too much, or the way that I write too much. So yeah, it's interesting to see where AI is cropping up, and people don't seem to like it. People get turned off, especially when it's being presented misleadingly. So I'm bullish on live streaming is what I'm saying, because I don't think the AI is going to be able to come for it just yet. Or if it did come for it, I don't think people would actually want that. It'd probably be pretty obvious when it was happening. I really want to know. Podcast is an FAA air traffic controller. AI can't do that job. ... Yet. It probably could, but we probably will have regulations where it's not allowed to fully. This is the same thing with the medical field. Like, whether or not AI could do brain surgery, you probably want a human in the room that has the ability to override the AI. And also, AI can't be held liable. So there always has to be a human who can be held liable, because you got to know who you can sue. This is America. You can sue anybody for anything, but you can't sue an AI. So you got to figure out who's getting sued in something as high stakes as air traffic controlling or medical procedures. All right. Alvaro Gonzalez says, while COVID kickstarted a general comfort in the business world to use Zoom, I am thinking AI might lead people to reprioritize in-person meetings, too easy to spoof someone's face. Yeah. I've been getting so many emails from IT lately about scams, and it's getting hard for IT to prove that they are themselves the real IT. What they always tell us is if somebody calls us from IT, hang up the phone and call IT back, because you just can't tell if the person calling you is a spoof or not. Will they be able to spoof live streaming? I don't know. Hopefully not. I don't want to get replaced. It's so weird, my job, because like a big part of my job is to elevate the research that we do at Redfin to the broader public. And to elevate this research to the broader public, I want everybody talking about it. I want it on all the platforms. And I would actually like it if when you go ask ChatGPT what's happening in the housing market or the economy, it tells you Daryl Fairweather, Redfin's chief economist, said XYZ if it cites me as an authoritative source. So part of me wants the AI to consume all of my content because I want the AI to know who I am so that I remain a relevant source of information because it's kind of my job on the economy. But at the same time, that means like I am teaching the AI how to be me. And that's very creepy. I know that all my content that goes on YouTube is, being read by Google and probably trained on by Google. Same with Instagram for Meta. But maybe this is the key to immortality. Not that I really care about immortality, but Odyssey's coming out. The Greeks were very into the idea of immortality, and maybe this is the way to always be remembered by the AI models. I don't know. That's kind of weird. All right, let's keep going. Okay, so Kyla Scanlon, who is an internet friend of mine, we're mutuals. She's very famous now, so I'm gonna brag about knowing her. Very nice person. She's an extremely nice person. Like anytime I message her, she's just like so sweet and happy to help. So yeah, shout out to Kyla Scanlon. She wrote an opinion article in the New York Times about how the housing crisis is also a retirement crisis. And her argument, which I fully agree with, is that one of the reasons that we are so unable to solve the housing crisis is because of NIMBYs, these homeowners who block new housing, because they don't want their home to go down in value. They see new housing as a threat to their home's value. Some of these NIMBYs are just like grumpy, and they don't like the idea of people moving into their neighborhood. Just because they don't like the idea of people moving into their neighborhood, they're not really concerned about their home value. There's another type of NIMBY that understands that increasing the supply of housing means that their home is less scarce on the market, that they would have to compete against other home sellers when they choose to sell if there are more homes sitting vacant available for sale. And that's why they block housing. And Kyla in this essay talks about how we have set up our economy such that homes are the nest egg. That's what people talk about all the time. My home is my nest egg. That when people retire, they start to draw down this nest egg either through selling it and downsizing, or through a reverse mortgage, or they have their mortgage paid off. So they just benefit from the fact that they get to live in this home that they bought a very long time ago for very little, and they still get to live in it for very cheap. And Kyla argues in the essay that the solution to this problem is to give people alternative sources for retirement savings. She points to Alaska's permanent dividend, which isn't really like a source of retirement, but it's a payment to the citizens of Alaska for living in Alaska, and all the oil that is extracted from Alaska, the oil companies have to pay a tax on that, which gets redistributed as a dividend. I think that's a fine idea. It's very Georgist, what they do in Alaska. Henry George, he was all about taxing natural resources, whether that's oil or land, and redistributing the proceeds. I guess my critique of this essay is that she doesn't go far enough. She doesn't talk about how if we really wanted to turn housing into a consumption good instead of an investment good, if we didn't want people to associate their homes with their retirement savings, what we could do is we could tax the land value. Homes themselves, the structures of homes, do not go up in value. They go down in value because homes get older, they become out of style, they need more repairs. That goes down in value. What's going up in value is the land that the home is sitting on. And if we wanted people to not think of their homes as investment vehicles, as retirement accounts, then we should stop allowing so much accumulation of value in the land to go only to the landowner themselves, because it creates all these bad incentives. We could tax it just like the way we tax oil in Alaska, and redistribute that. We could like use it to fund Social Security or whatever. We could use it to fund whatever. So I think Kyla does a great job of like making the link between the housing crisis and the retirement crisis. Another piece of this is that retirees don't have good options to move into. It's kind of like they've shot themselves in the foot. They didn't allow for any dense housing to be built, and now when they want to retire and downsize, there's like nowhere for them to move because they blocked all that housing from being developed. So if we were like part of releasing the housing supply is giving people better options to move into. So when we're building dense housing, we should be, I think, prioritizing dense housing that would be attractive to seniors so they have good places to move into. But they're never going to do that if they can sit in their homes even as the land values are increasing without, because they can just stay there. They don't feel the scarcity. So I think that we need to change the incentives. I mean, this is like the whole this is really what all of economics boils down to. If you want people to act differently, you need to change the incentives. And right now people are incentivized to treat their homes like retirement accounts because we allow those homes to go up in value so much that's people see, oh, my home is going to go up in value so much. It historically has. It is my retirement account. They don't need to do anything different if we keep things the same. Okay. Let's see. What other comments we got going on here? Let me check over on Instagram. My default setting into life is to opt out. It says Thailand tour guide. Talking about the meta opt out. Yeah, it's hard to keep track of it all. It's as the economist Richard Thaler would say, sludge. That these companies make it so much harder to opt out of things. They put the onus on you. Anyway, let's back to the other topic. All right, still talking about retirees. So the Wall Street Journal, Veronica Dogger, very nice reporter who I've met too. She wrote an article about why is labor force participation falling and looking at older workers. So this is the labor force participation rate for people over the age of 55. It went way up during the Great Recession because people's retirement accounts went down in value. And if people's retirement accounts go down in value, it means they can't afford to retire because they don't have as much money as they thought they did. So retirement slowed way down. They dropped around the pandemic. The pandemic itself prompted a lot of people to retire because, if there was a lot of layoffs that happened at the beginning of the pandemic, or people being sent home from work, and older people were more susceptible to COVID, so a lot of them dropped out of the labor force. They came back a little bit in 2022 when interest rates went back up and the economy reopened. I don't think it was interest rates. When the economy reopened in 2022, people came back, but now it's been sliding again. And wow, it is so low now, 37%. It has not been that low since 2005, the labor force participation rate. I think that this is probably because people's retirement accounts are doing really well. The stock market has been, it was doing good it's been doing good since 2021. The stock portfolio has been going up if you have money in AI companies, but really the whole S&P 500 is propped up on these AI companies. So it's probably that Americans are getting richer, or at least people's 401ks are going up, prompting people to retire. But let's see what else they said. More people trying. Yeah, wealth boom. All right, nailed it. Me and Troy Ludka at Nico Securities America have the same conclusion, which is that more people are retiring because they're wealthier. They can afford to retire. But they are still aging in place. As Kyla points out, they're still staying in their homes. So it's not that people can't retire. People are retiring. They are leaving the labor force, but they choose to stay in their large homes near where their jobs were instead of selling and moving somewhere cheaper or somewhere with better weather, as I talked about earlier. A lot of these older Americans are taking up homes that younger people with families would really like to occupy. Large homes, boomers. We did a report at Redfin about this, just to get the stats right. I'm sure I've talked about it on these live streams before, but empty nesters own 28% of large homes, while millennial families own 16%. When you look at it, baby boomers who live alone or just with one other adult, like their spouse, they own the highest share of 3-bedroom homes. And even though they're retiring, they're probably going to hold on to them, even though these millennials who live with their own children would love to have their homes. And I'm sure Gen Z is thinking ahead, like, when am I going to be able to have my 3-bedroom home to have a family with? Could take a while. All right, where was I? Da-da. Oh, this was some good news in housing. Might not seem like good news, but I consider this to be good news. San Francisco has made it easier for developers to build multifamily housing by dropping the affordable housing requirement from 15% to 5%. So it used to be that if you wanted to build housing in San Francisco, you would have to set aside 15% of units to be affordable on the local median income, which sounds great, but what it does is that it puts all the onus on the developer. Like, the developer's already spending all this money to acquire land in San Francisco, which is extremely expensive. And then they're told, like, well, you have to rent out some of these units for like probably less than even the land value, let alone the structure value of those units. And San Francisco has finally realized that this is like not the way to go about it. The better way to go about creating affordable housing options for low income people is to give them housing vouchers, to give them money essentially to go rent a place wherever they choose, instead of tying it to the structure, tying it to the person, because the person can then make choices that make sense for them instead of it being about the developer, and it doesn't impact the developer profits. It's like much more direct and more efficient than this developer requirement, which never really worked, and they finally admitted that it doesn't work. All right, wasn't Wall Street buying up assisted living properties, betting on older people moving there? So this is back to the retirement crisis. Yeah, I think I haven't looked into the stats on this, but I believe that a lot of these elder facilities have been bought up by private equity. And if you think private equity equates to evil, that's something to be concerned about. And that's like, I think, a reason why people don't want to downsize and move into these assisted living facilities. They don't want to be moving into bad nursing homes, essentially. Like, nursing homes have a bad reputation. People in them sometimes get abused by the staff, or sometimes the staff themselves are the ones being abused by the owners, if they're big business owners. But there's like an in-between. Like, you can get rid of your 3-bedroom home and move into a condo in a place like the Villages in Florida, where it's just a development that is catered to older people. There's a difference between senior living, that just is like about the lifestyle of being older, versus assisted living, which is like you need medical professionals on staff to take care of people who are in very ill health. So I think the private equity is more about the assisted living villages. If private equity was building the new Villages, if you don't know what the Villages is, you should look it up, because it is hilarious. Villages, Florida. The Villages are this like planned retirement community in Florida, where it's just like Disney, or it's like summer camp, endless summer camp for old people. You have to be, I think, above a certain age to live there. They have a bunch of programming that is geared towards older people, like, I don't know, the stereotypical stuff: water aerobics, bingo nights, pickleball, stuff like that. And I don't think you can drive there. I think you're only allowed to ride around in golf carts. So it really is very planned, like idealized place to live for older people, and a lot of older people love it and they move there. Whenever there's an election, reporters always go down to the Villages to find out what the old people are thinking. So it's famous in that respect. So yeah, I don't know who owns the Villages, but if it was private equity owning the Villages, like, who cares? As long as the people there are happy and getting what they want. I think it becomes more of an issue when we start talking about people who are not capable of taking care of themselves, advocating for themselves, and what an exploitative owner could do to people who are ripe for exploitation. That's when it starts to get very concerning. All right, let me pop over to TikTok and see if anyone else is commenting. Someone commented boomers. All right, well, thanks for the engagement. Appreciate all the comments. Someone asked, how about migration back from Texas or from Texas back to California because of different taxes? Yes, I've heard these stories about people who moved to Texas. I'll go back to this visual. We've heard stories from our real estate agents that some of the clients who left California moved to Texas during the pandemic because, I don't know, because of Joe Rogan, because of low taxes, because of remote work. Some of them decided to move back. Sometimes it was because they went through a Texas summer and realized just how hot it is in Texas. Sometimes it's because they realized that the money that they were saving on income taxes, they were paying even more money in property taxes. Sometimes they just miss their family, or they got called back to the office because of return to office. So yeah, there has been boomerang migration for some of the people that left during the pandemic who have moved back. I was a pandemic migrant, but I stayed. I'm not in Texas, in Wisconsin. All right, what else is going on? Should talk about this. So there's this article in the New York Times about how in this housing market, the second home comes first. Basically talking about how some people are using this strategy where like they live in a very high cost of living city like New York, where they can't afford to own the home that they would want to live in full time, but they can afford a home in a vacation destination, a couple hours drive away. So that's the home they decide to buy. So instead of the first home being the home that they live in full time, it's the home that they vacation in. Maybe they do a side hustle of Airbnb. And in New York City, this seems like it would be where the trend would really take off, because New York City is this place where there's extremely expensive real estate where all the jobs are. But if you drive for a couple hours, then you're in these markets with really cheap real estate. So that's like the hack if you want to be a homeowner, is to buy where it's cheap, where you might want to take a day trip every so often, or if you work remotely, maybe you'll work there half time, and then you can access home ownership in a way that you can't where you actually live, and people get to achieve that status of being a homeowner if that's what they want. It seems like it kind of feels a little backwards, but then when you look at the affordability piece of it, it starts to make a lot of sense. And if you're going to be visiting, say, the Poconos multiple times a year, maybe it does make sense to own instead of rent that second home. And then you get to pick all the furniture and do everything just how you like it, and you get to really experience the joy of home ownership. There's a lot of things about home ownership that aren't so much enjoyable, like when a tree falls on your house or whatever, but there are joys of customizing your home and really putting your own touches to it. And then you can go have your friends out and have friend trips or family trips there, and they get to see all of your unique taste in the second home that you have purchased and decorated yourself. So I definitely get the appeal. And it'll be interesting to see if this takes off outside of New York City, or if this is just a New York trend. This would be harder to pull off in LA, for example, because a home in Palm Springs is going to cost nearly as much as a home in LA. Same with Big Bear. LA is just so sprawling that the unaffordability of it has touched every part of California that people would want to vacation in. So I don't think this would really work in California. But I could see it working in New York. I could see perhaps it working in Washington, D.C. or Boston, that people's first home purchase ends up being in a day trip away instead of in the city that they actually live in. All right. Another interesting trend that I'll just call out before I wrap up is inland college towns are seeing double-digit home price growth. So we always kind of talk about different geographies in housing. We talk about, the Northeast versus the Sun Belt versus the West Coast, or urban versus rural. But the fundamental thing that people want, I think, when they're deciding how livable a neighborhood is, they want a place that has a lot of amenities, where they can access healthcare and high quality schooling for their kids, where there's entertaining things to do. And college towns, even if they're in, the middle of the like flyover states, as you might call them, or places that are more far flung, they offer that. Even Morgantown, West Virginia, you wouldn't think of that as being an urban center, but there is a university in Morgantown, West Virginia, that gives you that like city living and high amenities, even though it's in West Virginia, which you think of as being very rural. So I know that like sometimes investors like to watch these because they want to hear where I think would be a good place to invest. And you probably already know this, but college towns in otherwise cheap areas, I think are always a good investment because they just offer a lot of amenities. And especially if it's a college, it's pretty established. It's not going anywhere. Um, I guess there are going to be fewer college students pretty soon because Gen Z is a small generation and Gen Alpha could be even smaller. So maybe you have to worry about some of these colleges closing. But for the top colleges or the colleges that are top in their state, they will probably be around for a while and be a solid investment real estate wise. Okay. Well, what else? I talked about how I'm going to be going live, so I'll plug that one more time. I am I live stream every Thursday at 3 Eastern, 2 Central. But next Thursday at 3 Eastern, 2 Central, I will be on Planet Money's live podcast. This is available for NPR Plus subscribers. So, public radio has lost a lot of its funding. This is a great way that you can support NPR, and you get to listen to me live stream next week if you're missing me. And then the week after that, I will be on vacation. So I will be back in 2 weeks. But until then, if you miss me, you can always buy my book, Hate the Game, Economic Cheat Codes for Life, Love, and Work, available now in hardcover, ebook, and audiobook. If you don't believe me, it's a good book. Just believe Stephen Levitt. He called it fabulous, unlike any economics book I've ever read, and that's from the author of Freakonomics. So, if that doesn't convince you, I don't know. It's only like $9 on Amazon right now. So go get it before that sale ends. And I will see you in 2 weeks. Bye-bye.